Hi, my name is Ilaria and I am 32 years old. I work as a leading specialist in a large cosmetology company that produces and develops elite professional cosmetics intended exclusively for salon use and sold all over the world, from New York to Tokyo. My job requires high concentration, extensive knowledge of chemistry, constant participation in international conferences, where I present the latest formulations developed by our laboratory, and daily communication with beauty industry professionals, for whom every word spoken from the podium is important. And yes, my salary really allows me to live well, so well that 2 years ago I was able to buy my own, spacious and cozy apartment in one of the quiet areas of the city, with high ceilings, large windows, and a terrace, where it is pleasant to drink coffee in the morning, listening to the world wake up. And before we continue, write in the comments from which city you are watching this video. Enjoy watching. But despite the comfort I have been able to provide myself, in recent weeks one thought has been increasingly and persistently settling in my head: the thought of a house, a real one, in the countryside, wooden or stone, but always with a view of the surface of a calm lake, strewn with morning fog and silence, which is not disturbed by cars, sirens, or calls from work. I imagine waking up in this house on a Saturday morning, walking barefoot onto the wooden terrace, taking a cup of strong coffee in my hands and just sitting, looking at the water, listening to the silence and feeling how all the tension accumulated over the work week dissolves in this landscape, as if it had never existed. This picture beckoned me again and again. There was something almost painfully attractive in it, as if it was there, by the lake, that I could finally feel truly myself. And so, having decided that it was time to share these thoughts with my loved ones, I chose the evening of Sunday dinner, when, as scheduled, we gathered at my father and Sarah's big round table in the kitchen, smelling of home-cooked food and cinnamon. But before I get to that conversation, I need to explain a little why that moment was not so simple for me. The thing is, my family was never simple and straightforward, and my childhood consisted of endless moving back and forth, 2 months at my father's, 2 months at my mother's, and so on in a circle, over and over again, with suitcases always standing by the door, and a constant feeling of temporariness in every room, in every house. My parents divorced when I was 12, and, as often happens, each tried to build his life anew. My father was much faster in this. Just a year later he married a woman named Sarah, who, despite the complexity of the situation, showed me kindness and sincere concern from the very beginning, not trying to take my mother's place, but always being there when it was really needed. Soon they had Michelle, my half-brother, 4 years younger than me. When I first saw him, he was only 9, and I was surprised to realize that I enjoyed being around him. He was not annoying, did not demand attention, but on the contrary, he was drawn to me with such pure childlike openness that we very quickly became truly close. He was the younger brother I never had, and I, in turn, tried to be a real older sister to him, as much as possible in such a situation. My mother, on the other hand, could not come to her senses for a long time after the divorce. She remarried only 3 years later, and to be honest, it did not bring anything good into my life. Her chosen one, a man named Valentino, always kept me at a cool distance, spoke with restraint, almost formally, and his daughter, Ginevra, was 2 years older than me and treated me with undisguised irritation, as if I had invaded her personal space, destroyed the established order to which she had every right. I was 15 then, she was 17, and every minute spent in that house I felt superfluous. It seemed that not a single word I said was taken seriously, not a single gesture evoked a response, and even being in the kitchen in the presence of this family felt like a punishment. I lived there as if I were walking on a knife edge, afraid to breathe too loudly, to speak too much, or simply to be myself. Against all this, my father and Sarah's house seemed like a real refuge to me. There I felt seen, heard, and needed. Sarah helped me with my homework, patiently explaining complex formulas, and even sat with me until late at night before important exams. Michelle constantly asked me to play video games with him, and we spent hours laughing, arguing, and discussing strategies. And my dad, for the first time in years, it seemed, he truly smiled, joked, was calm, and there was again that warmth in his eyes that I had not seen for so long. And one evening, when I was 16, I made up my mind. I sat down opposite my mother and, without looking up, quietly said, "Mom, I think I want to live with Dad permanently." I expected a scene, tears, reproaches, screaming, but instead she simply nodded, looked somewhere past me and said, "If that's what you want, Ilaria." At that moment, it seemed to me that she sighed with relief so deep, so liberating, as if I were not a daughter, but a suitcase that could finally be left at the station. It was painful, tearing and cold, but at the same time I felt relieved, because, despite all the weight of this decision, I knew that now there would be something permanent, predictable, reliable in my life. So I moved in with my father, Sarah, and Michelle, not for 2 months, but forever. We rarely saw each other with my mother, mostly wrote to each other, and over the years our conversations became more and more formal. This became especially noticeable after Ginevra got married and had a child. Since then, my mother proudly called herself a grandmother, posted photos of the baby on social networks, wrote long posts about what a great girl Ginevra was, how proud she was of her. I was silent, just watched, just accepted. I graduated from high school in a home where I was loved, and it was there, surrounded by warmth and support, that I decided to go to university to study chemistry. Sarah and Dad didn't just support my choice, they insisted on paying for my education. "This is an investment in your future, Ilaria," Sarah said, putting her arm around my shoulders. And Mom didn't even come to my graduation. College was great, despite all the difficulties that accompanied this stage of life: sleepless nights before exams, intense labs, long hours spent in libraries studying chemical formulas, reaction mechanisms, and complex scientific texts. But perhaps it was during these years that I first truly felt that I had found my place, that I and science, especially chemistry, exist in some special dialogue that only we understand, where molecules and structures come alive in my imagination, and formulas become almost poetic expressions of the beauty of order in this world. This interest, almost a passion for precision and deep understanding of processes, gradually, step by step, led me to my current profession in the field of cosmetic chemistry, where each new composition, each formula, each product line is the result of painstaking scientific work, in which I put all my attention, all my knowledge, and in which I see a reflection of myself. Working at Skinner was more than just a position. From the moment I received an invitation to an interview at this prestigious company until the day I was officially accepted into the team, I felt that I was joining something special, a community of professionals where not only knowledge is valued, but also passion for the business. I was lucky, my salary began to grow rapidly, and with it came the feeling that I was becoming stronger, more confident, more mature. During my years of study and the first years of my career, I almost did not communicate with my mother, because her world was completely absorbed by Ginevra and that little girl who now called her grandmother. For my part, I decided that since they weren't expecting me, I wouldn't impose myself, because I had a family, maybe not by blood, but by spirit: Dad, Sarah, Michelle, people who truly loved me, supported me, and never pretended that they didn't care. But everything changed about 2 years ago, when on a very ordinary day, in the middle of the week, my phone suddenly rang, and on the screen appeared a name that I had almost forgotten how to see: Mom. I didn't answer right away, as if I was internally weighing whether to pick up the phone, but something, maybe a voice from the past, maybe simple curiosity, made me touch the icon, and the next second I heard her voice, a little tired, but still recognizable. "Ilaria, I miss you," she said. These words, so simple, so ordinary, sounded in my head like a bolt from the blue. I hardly knew what to answer, and although doubts, wariness, and even slight irritation immediately flared up in my soul, I still agreed to meet her for a cup of coffee. This meeting was strange. My mother seemed different, softer, more attentive. She asked a lot of questions, asked about my work, about the apartment I bought, about how much I earned, was interested in where I went on vacation, and with whom. I wanted to believe that it was all out of concern, that she really wanted to return what was lost. Perhaps, like in childhood, I again longed to hear warmth and sincerity in her voice. We began to communicate more often. She called every few weeks, inquired about things, asked how projects were going, whether I had enough money, whether everything was okay with my health. Sometimes she shared her problems, hinted at financial difficulties, and I, without asking unnecessary questions, transferred money to her. Small amounts, but enough to cover utilities or purchases in the store. I sincerely thought that I was doing the right thing, that I was acting like a good daughter. And now, sitting in my apartment, on this Friday night, when the city outside the window was still noisy and living its own life. I thought with special excitement about the fact that perhaps very soon I would have a place where I could escape from all this, from the hustle and bustle, from the eternal race, from the inexorable pressure of the big city. The house by the lake was not just a whim or an investment, it was my dream, which now seemed within arm's reach. And I decided that I would tell those who really mattered: Dad, Sarah, and Michelle, who is now 28, lives separately with his girlfriend, but between us there is still that amazing closeness that we have carried since childhood. We still consult each other, share news, laugh at old jokes, and I knew that he would be sincerely happy for me. Saturday night at Dad and Sarah's house was exactly as I remembered it from childhood: cozy, warm, filled with the aromas of home-cooked food and quiet conversations, interrupted by light laughter. I walked into the kitchen, and the smell of Sarah's famous meat stew, slowly baking in the oven, embraced me like an old blanket, reminding me of endless evenings spent in this house. Dad, as always, came up first and hugged me tightly, and Sarah, wiping her hands on a towel, kissed me on the cheek. "You seem excited about something," she noted, taking the bottle of wine from my hands. I just smiled in response, anticipating the moment when I would voice my plans. "I'm thinking about buying a country house on the lake," I finally said, and immediately saw how Dad's face lit up, not just with joy, but with real pride. "Ilaria, this is fantastic. You worked so hard for this." For a moment, I felt like that girl who brought home an A in chemistry and waited for praise. Sarah clapped her hands. "Oh, honey, we're so proud of you. The lake house sounds so wonderful." I nodded. "The best part is that you guys can come visit, and Michelle and his girlfriend can too. We could have family weekends." We spent the rest of the evening discussing details, me showing pictures of places I liked on my phone, Sarah asking about the area, Dad about fishing, and there was no formality in their voices, only genuine concern and support. As we washed the dishes together, Sarah suddenly said, "This is a very smart investment, and you really deserve a place where you can relax and be yourself." I smiled and shared my favorite part of that dream. "I always think about sitting on the porch in the morning with a cup of coffee and watching the sun rise over the lake." "That sounds like heaven," Dad said quietly. And then, after a short pause, added, "Your mother would be proud." His words, so unexpected, made me freeze for a second. My mother, I really hadn't told her about it yet, although we had dinner planned for next week. I would tell her then. The following Saturday, I went to my mother's as planned, but as soon as I approached her door, I felt a strange, even slightly unpleasant excitement in my chest, as if I subconsciously sensed that this evening could turn into something more than just a family dinner. Over the past 2 years, since we had reconnected, I had been in that house many times, sat at that same dining table, eaten the familiar lasagna, talked with Valentino, nodded at Ginevra's questions, watched Emma grow up, but never, not on any of those visits, had I felt as free as I did in my father's house, where every corner was filled with warmth, memories, and genuine care. My mother greeted me at the door with a hug, and when I pressed myself against her for a second, I was enveloped in the scent of her favorite perfume, the same one she had used when I was a child, and which evoked memories of her hastily putting on makeup in front of the mirror or getting ready for work, leaving behind a recognizable, slightly heavy, but somehow cozy scent. Valentino was at home, as always reserved and silent, sitting in a chair by the window, his nose buried in his tablet, and barely raised his head when I entered. Ginevra and Emma had arrived the day before, and the girl was now reclining on the carpet, coloring in pictures in a huge children's book, not even looking in my direction when I greeted her by name. "Ilaria!" Ginevra exclaimed, her voice sounding strained, like an artificial smile on someone's advertising face. "How's work going? Still making a lot of money?" "Everything is going well," I replied, trying not to show that I was being teased by the studied casualness with which she said the last word, and took my usual place at the table. The dinner proceeded in the same manner as always. Mom served her famous lasagna with a crispy crust, Valentino told something about renovating a warehouse in a hardware store, Ginevra complained about her husband always disappearing at work, Emma asked for more juice. It seemed, every 5 minutes, everyone was talking, no one was really listening. And all this took place in the atmosphere of a carefully constructed normal family evening, in which I always felt a little superfluous, like an actress who accidentally ended up in someone else's play. And yet I had not come just like that. I was burning with news, important, personal, joyful, and I, barely waiting for a pause between conversations, said, trying to sound calm, but at the same time not hiding a slight excitement. I have amazing news that I want to share with you. I decided to buy a country house by the lake. I saved for a long time, carefully planned, and it seems that now is the time to invest in something real, that will be only mine. I naively expected at least a shadow of enthusiasm, those sincere reactions that I received from my dad, Sarah, and Michelle when I told them the same news, but instead, as soon as the words "house by the lake" left my lips, I saw a strange gleam in my mother's eyes, quickly replaced by interest. She slowly put her fork on the plate, looked straight at me and, stretching out her voice a little, said, "House by the lake, how wonderful." But her tone, her gaze, her facial expression, everything in her changed, as if something inside her had instantly started working, spinning, calculating. She leaned forward a little and, with an almost soft intonation, behind which I immediately felt a hidden harshness, said, "I'm turning 60 in 4 months, this could be the perfect moment. You could give me this house for my birthday, it would be so generous, Ilaria, a real gift, we could all use it, and you'll still be able to come there on weekends." I almost choked on my water, so unexpected and, frankly, absurd did her offer seem to me. "Mom," I said slowly, trying to keep my voice from shaking, "this is a very expensive gift. I was going to buy this house for myself." Her face lengthened. As if she hadn't expected a refusal, she leaned back, folded her arms across her chest and said with a hint of resentment, "For myself? But, Ilaria, think how wonderful it would be if we all had a place like this. Valentino, Ginevra, Emma, we could all benefit from a little time out of town. It would be our own little family place." I took a deep breath, feeling everything inside me begin to tense up, a familiar feeling growing in my chest, the same one I had felt so often as a teenager, trying to find a place in this part of my family. "So you can come, of course," I said carefully, trying not to offend anyone, "but I want to own this house myself." Ginevra chuckled, leaned back in her chair, and said with a grin, "Oh, come on, Ilaria, you make good money, don't be greedy with Mom." My cheeks flushed as if someone had splashed fire on them. I looked up, met her smug gaze, and said calmly but firmly, "It's not about greed, it's just a smart decision. A house is too big a gift, it's an investment I've worked for years to earn." Mother's face changed, her lips tightened, her gaze grew colder, as if in one moment she had forgotten everything she had said over the past 2 years, all her calls, all the talk of getting closer, all the warmth that seemed to be reborn between us. She nodded slowly, lifting her chin slightly, and said, "I think you should think carefully about what I asked you, Ilaria. Family must come first." The rest of the dinner passed under the weight of a heavy silence that no one seemed to want to acknowledge. Mother perked up artificially, changed the subject to the weather and the prices at the supermarket. Emma continued to color. Valentino cast glances at me that showed more disapproval than interest, and Ginevra occasionally smiled, as if she enjoyed my situation. When I returned home, my first thought was to pour myself a glass of wine, red, tart, thick, the kind that helps calm the mind. I sat down on the couch, put my feet up, looked at the wall where the photos hung, not of this family, but of the one with Dad, Sarah, Michelle, and took a sip and tried to process everything that had happened. My mother had seriously expected me to buy her a house that would probably cost more than $300,000. The more I thought about it, the more anger grew inside me, not a hot-tempered, not hysterical one, but a cold, logical one, and perhaps fair. I had tried, I had worked, I had saved, lived frugally, planned this move for years, and now someone, even my mother, had simply decided that they had a right to it. I thought about how many times over the past 2 years I had sent her money, $50, $100, without complaint, without reminders, because I sincerely believed that I was helping her, that this was a gesture of love, care, support. But now, sitting in the silence of my apartment, I suddenly wondered, maybe all this time she was checking how much she could get from me? And by the time I finished my wine and put the glass on the table, I already knew that the decision had been made. I would not buy this house for her, not because I was mean or selfish, but because it was not her right to demand such a thing from me. If she wanted a house by the lake, she could save up and buy it herself, and having made this choice, I suddenly felt something inside me become lighter. The next morning, not even waiting for full awakening, still in my robe and with a cup of coffee in my hand, I dialed the number of my friend David, who, in addition to being one of the most reliable and balanced people in my life, worked as a realtor and perfectly understood my tastes, priorities, and tendency to carefully prepare for everything important. Remember, I told you that I wanted to look at houses by the lake. I think I'm finally ready to take this seriously, I said, looking at the slowly floating clouds outside the window. David responded immediately, with his usual light irony and cheerfulness. Of course I remember. I was waiting for you to stop just dreaming and start acting. I'll start collecting proposals. What's your budget? We talked for almost an hour, discussing the details. I wanted something cozy. Not too big, but definitely with wide windows overlooking the lake, preferably with a terrace or veranda where I could spend morning hours with a cup of coffee, reading, or just silently watching the surface of the water. It was important that the house was not too far from the city, a maximum of an hour's drive, so that I could go there on weekends without turning each trip into a tiring journey. David listened attentively, asked clarifying questions and promised to call back as soon as something suitable appeared. 2 months passed, during which I was already beginning to think that maybe the ideal option did not exist, or that I would have to compromise. But one day, closer to the evening, David called me, and I understood from his voice that he was excited, like a child who found a treasure. Ilaria, I found your house. It matches your description perfectly, and it just went on the market. You have to see it. I did not put it off. That same day we went to see the house. And as soon as I got out of the car, I realized that David was not exaggerating. In front of me lay a small, but amazingly well-kept 2-room cottage, framed by a wooden veranda that encircled it along the perimeter, creating a sense of continuity between the interior and nature. The house stood right on the shore of the lake, and when I came closer, I heard the water quietly splashing against the coastal stones. It was like a dream. The air was filled with the scent of pine trees, the sun was shining through the leaves, and the silence that was impossible to find in the city. The price was, of course, at the limit of my budget, but with a reasonable mortgage, I could afford it. I want this house, I said, not waiting for the tour to be over, and David just smiled, knowing that I was rarely so decisive. 3 weeks later, I stood on the front porch, holding the keys to my own house, and I couldn't believe that it had actually happened. It was official. The mortgage was signed, the deal was closed. I was the full owner of a cozy cottage by the lake. I took a selfie in front of the entrance, slightly disheveled, but immensely happy, and posted it on Facebook with the caption, "Dreams do come true, finally got my own house by the lake." I had just begun to explore the rooms, looking at the details, mentally arranging the furniture, when the phone rang. A name appeared on the screen, Mom. I honestly hesitated for a second, but still answered, "Ilaria, I just saw your message." Her voice was sharp, like a tightrope. "Why didn't you consult me before buying a house?" I stopped mid-step, my gaze involuntarily directed to the window, which opened onto a view of the calm water surface. "Consult with you? Why would I need that?" I said, trying to remain calm. "Because I'm still going to buy this house," she answered with such confidence, as if she were talking about buying a bag. "You're lucky that I like it." I sighed heavily, closed my eyes and said, "Mom, we've already talked about this. I'm not giving you this house for your birthday." Her voice became sharp, almost angry. "You're selfish, Ilaria. I've dreamed of a country house for years. You have a lot of money, but for me it's everything." And then she burst into tears, a real hysteria, with sniffling, ragged breathing, accusations and reproaches. "I can't believe that my own daughter won't do this for me." Before I could respond, she hung up. I stood there in silence, staring at the screen, and then shook my head and put the phone down on the table. I was not going to call her back, explain, persuade, engage in another round of emotional pressure. It was ridiculous, rude, and, frankly, manipulative. And although I didn't feel guilty, I felt tired from the situation itself, from the repetitive scenarios, from the fact that I again had to defend my right to my own dreams. 2 weeks later, I went to my dad and Sarah for dinner again. I needed someone to talk to hear a voice of reason, to calm down and just feel supported. When I told them what had happened, Sarah's reaction was immediate. "This is completely unacceptable," she said, shaking her head. "Ilaria, please tell me you're not even considering this." "Of course not," I replied. But she doesn't stop. She texts me all the time. "Look, I handed them the phone, showing them the correspondence, one message after another, all in the same tone. She was tired of city life, she deserved a place to rest, I had to think about my family first. This is emotional blackmail, Sarah said firmly, don't you dare give in. Dad was silent for a while, and then looked at me seriously, almost sternly. Ilaria, your mother never put you first, not when you were a child, not now, you don't owe her a house. These words, spoken without malice, but with complete confidence, as if someone had finally spoken the truth out loud, became a point of support for me. Their support returned my inner clarity, and I decided not to let these messages influence my decisions anymore. I began to ignore most of her letters, answering only the neutral ones, those that did not concern the house, but as her birthday approached, they became more and more insistent, dramatic, offended. I knew I had to do something anyway, not for her sake, but for mine. I decided I wanted to give her a gift, not the one she demanded, but one that would show that I could still be generous, considerate, caring, but on my own terms. So, on the eve of her 60th birthday, I stopped by a car dealership and bought her a small, neat used car, not a luxury car, but reliable, in good condition, noticeably better than the one she had been driving for the past 10 years. The car cost me about $15,000, and I considered the gesture more than generous. I asked that the keys be placed in an elegant little jewelry box, and agreed that the car would remain in the dealership until the end of the party. After the party, we would go pick it up together. When I arrived at my mother's party, she greeted me with such feigned warmth that I almost believed her sincerity for a moment. She hugged me tightly, a little longer than usual, patted me on the shoulder and, looking into my eyes, whispered, Ilaria, my dear, how glad I am to see you. Come in, I have saved you the best seat. Quite a few guests had already gathered in the room, her friends, members of the Valentino family, several neighbors whom I remembered from childhood, and some who were completely unfamiliar to me. All these people were chatting animatedly, filling glasses with sparkling wine, laughing at old jokes, and everything in the atmosphere of this party indicated that it was carefully planned, as if the stage had been set in advance, and each participant knew his role. I sat down on the indicated chair next to my mother, and she, leaning towards me, quietly, almost intimately said, I really hope that your gift will be worthy. I'm still waiting for a special moment. I just smiled, without saying a word, letting her figure out what we were talking about. I didn't want to ruin her anticipation, but I didn't want to participate in the illusion either. The party went on. There were toasts, phrases like another lap of the sun and you're just blossoming, my dear, laughter, a little tired, a little false, but familiar, like the background of all such gatherings. A cake with cream roses appeared, the aroma of coffee and sweet vanilla hung in the air. Someone told stories about their mother, how they met her, how she helped in a difficult moment, what kind of cupcakes she bakes. I tried to be polite, to keep up the conversation, nodding, smiling, pretending that everything was happening within the norm, although tension was growing inside me, like before an approaching storm. And then came the moment when everything turned upside down. Mom stood up from the table, tapped her glass with her fork to get everyone's attention, and raised her voice with a beaming smile, everyone, I have some wonderful news to share with you. My daughter Ilaria has prepared a very special surprise for me tonight. My breath caught in my throat, and I realized that she was about to ruin everything. Ilaria has decided to give me her beautiful new lake house for my birthday, she announced proudly. The room erupted in applause, voices of admiration. Someone shouted, wow, and someone said, how lucky you are to have such a daughter. I froze. As if someone had pulled the ground out from under my feet, the guests clapped, congratulated her. Someone had already started to raise a glass in my direction, and she stood there, her eyes sparkling, enjoying her role, waiting for me to stand up, nod, and confirm this lie. But I wasn't going to take part in this performance. Slowly, my hands shaking, I stood up, walked over to her, and handed her a small box wrapped in velvet. The keys to the lake house aren't here, Mom, I said clearly, looking her straight in the eye, but I'm sure you'll like what I did give you. Her face changed in a matter of seconds, from delight to confusion, from confusion to irritation, and then to fury. She snatched the box from me without opening it and walked out of the room, slamming the door. I heard the trash can creak in the kitchen, then she returned, her face icy, her voice metallic. I threw it out, she said, there's no room for greed or selfishness here, get out. A few of the guests were so surprised that they couldn't even hide their awkwardness. Some looked away, some tried to continue the conversation about the weather to avoid a direct confrontation. Valentino stood against the wall, arms crossed over his chest, nodding with some kind of gloomy approval, and Ginevra, bowing her head, let out her usual sarcastic laugh. "You disgraced yourself today, Ilaria," she whispered, not hiding her pleasure. "Well, you couldn't just make that one gesture for her?" I didn't say a word. I stood up, slowly, walked past everyone, went into the kitchen, opened the lid of the trash can and pulled out that very box. She didn't even open it, just threw it away. Then, without saying goodbye, I left through the front door, and only on the street, when the door slammed behind me, I realized that I was shaking with indignation and pain. Returning home, I didn't know what to do. Emotions were tearing me apart from within. My mind was trying to find an explanation, but everything seemed absurd. I pulled out my phone and immediately called Sarah. "She threw my gift in the trash. She didn't even open it," I said, my voice shaking. There was silence, then Sarah's voice, hard, breaking into anger. "Ilaria, I'm so sorry, she had no right, it's disgusting." I burst into tears, and in those tears there was everything: humiliation, disappointment, a sense of betrayal. I told her everything: how my mother announced that I was giving her the house, how she made me look capricious in front of everyone, how she threw away the gift without even looking at it, how Ginevra smirked, how Valentino was silent but supportive. "I want to call her and tell her everything I think," I said through sobs. "Please, don't," Sarah said. "Don't let her get into your head again. You've already said everything, just let her go." After hanging up, I sat on the couch, in the darkness of my apartment, holding the box with the car keys in my hands, the very one that was supposed to be a gift. What should I do with it now? Return it? Get my money back? But the longer I looked at this thing, the more clearly I realized it was not for the person I originally intended it for. The next morning, I went to my dad and Sarah's house, with the keys in my pocket and determination in my heart. Sarah opened the door, smiling as always, but there was worry in her eyes. I took out the box and handed it to her. "This was supposed to be a birthday present for my mother." She threw it away without even opening it. "But I want you to have it, because you were a real mother to me." Sarah carefully opened the box and saw the keys inside. Her eyes immediately filled with tears. "Ilaria, you can't give me a car," she whispered, as if she didn't believe it. "Yes, I can," I said. "You've done more for me than my real mother ever tried to do. You deserve it." Sarah burst into tears and hugged me with the strength that only those who are truly loved are hugged. At that moment, I felt that I was doing the right thing. We drove to the dealership together to pick up the car, and when she first got behind the wheel, her face lit up with such joy, such genuine gratitude, that I felt a lump in my throat. The car suited her perfectly. Compact, reliable, comfortable, with good safety and a smooth ride. I took a photo of her next to the new car, smiling, touched, real. When I got home after that ill-fated evening, which should have been a celebration, but turned into a public humiliation and a deep disappointment for me, I posted a photo of Sarah next to her new car on Facebook, accompanying the photo with a short but clear caption: "When your birth mother rejects a gift, you give it to someone who truly deserves it. This car is now in good hands." I did not expect responses, did not seek support. I just wanted to record the truth, to let it come out, as scars do when they heal. It was my quiet farewell to an illusion. The next morning, just as the sky was beginning to turn gray and the city was just waking up, my phone rang with alarming regularity. It was my mother. She called again and again, every few minutes, as if she hoped the constant pressure would break my resolve. I ignored each call. Then, when she realized she couldn't get through, she started sending me messages, one after another, with increasing aggression, accusations, pleas, and threats. "Ilaria, you have to give me that car. It was my birthday present. I can't believe you would do this to your mother," she wrote. "That car is mine. You're stealing me." I deleted each message without a response or emotion. She made her choice the moment she threw the box in the trash, not even bothering to look at what was inside. And if we are to be completely honest, that evening she threw away not only the gift, but also the remains of our trust, destroying everything fragile that we had built over the past 2 years. 2 days later, returning home after a stressful day at work, when I finally allowed myself to relax, turned on the music, lit a candle and began to cook dinner, there was a sudden knock on the door, sharply, demandingly, with such insistence that I immediately felt how the muscles of my back tensed. I went to the door and looked through the peephole. My mother and Ginevra were standing on the threshold, their faces were distorted with anger, and I realized this was the moment that I did not want, but for which, deep down, I was ready. I opened the door. "How could you do this to me?" Mom screamed and, without waiting for an invitation, pushed her way inside, pushing her shoulders through the air like a hurricane. Ginevra followed her like a shadow, slamming the door behind her. "You lied to everyone," she screamed. "You made Mom look like a fool, and then you gave her gift to that woman." I couldn't help but burst out laughing. The laughter came unexpectedly, bitter, slightly cracked. "Her gift?" I asked again. "The one she threw in the trash can?" Mom stepped closer, her voice trembling with resentment. "I didn't know what was in there, you should have told me." I looked at her and felt something inside me grow cold, the last drop of hope for understanding disappearing. "You showed me how much you love me, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "You threw my gift away without even looking at it. All you cared about was getting this house." "That's not true," she began, but stopped, realizing how false she sounded. "You know what?" she continued, her tone changing abruptly, as if dropping a mask. "Okay, I'm going to sue you. I'm going to sue you and get this car back." I laughed again, softer this time, almost regretfully. "Good luck," I said. "I have pictures of you throwing my gift in the trash, and 20 witnesses who saw it." Her face went white, her lips pursed. She clearly hadn't thought of that. I was kidding," she muttered, "but you have to give me my car back. I'm your real mother, not your stepmother." "Sarah loves me," I said with unexpected ease. "You only love my money, that's the difference." "That's not true," she cried, her eyes filling with tears again. "I love you." "No, Mom, don't. If you loved me, you'd be happy to have my house. Instead, you tried to take it away from me. You threw away a gift worth $15,000 because it wasn't worth enough to you." Ginevra stepped forward, her face twisted with rage. "You're ridiculous. Ilaria, Mom deserves that car more than your stepmother." "Get out," I said, pointing to the door, "both of you, and don't write to me anymore." They left. Mom was still sobbing, and Ginevra was muttering something about my ingratitude. I locked the door behind them, pouring myself a large glass of wine. It was the end, and the beginning. 8 months have passed since that night. Since then, I have not spoken to my mother, or Ginevra, or Valentino. My mother tried to call and write for some time, but in the end I blocked her number. She gave up. I did not feel angry, only relief. Now my life is quiet, full, free. I spend weekends in my house by the lake, listening to the wind playing in the treetops, reading on the veranda, where the morning light falls on the pages of a book, swimming in the cool water, as if washing away the remnants of pain. Dad and Sarah often come to visit. Sarah loves her car, says that it gives her a sense of independence that she lacked before. She drives it with such dignity, with such ease, that I smile every time I watch her. Michelle and his girlfriend Emma like to come too. In the evenings, we light a fire, cook s'mores, tell stories, and talk about the future. Emma dreams of architecture, and Michelle seems to be seriously considering moving to a house by the lake for good. We laugh, argue, enjoy the moment, and every time I sit on the veranda, looking at the water surface illuminated by the last rays of the sun, I think, sometimes you have to go through a storm to find your own quiet refuge. Last month, as August dragged on with its lazy, golden days of sunshine and quiet evenings by the water, Michelle asked me one evening as we sat on the porch with cups of tea if he could propose to Emma at my lake house. His voice was a little nervous, but there was determination in his eyes, and the moment he said those words, I felt my heart fill with warmth, not just because my brother was growing up and creating his own life, but because this house was the place where he wanted to take one of his most important steps. "Of course," I answered without thinking, "of course, this house is for family, and I wouldn't want you to propose anywhere else." He smiled in that genuine way that only those who are truly happy can. A week later, on a particularly calm and windless evening, when the lake was like a mirror reflecting the pink sky and the slowly setting sun, Michelle took Emma to the dock. We all knew what was going to happen, but we kept our distance, giving them privacy. I watched from a distance. They were standing at the very edge, hand in hand, and when he got down on one knee, my heart skipped a beat, as if it were happening to me. Emma cried, laughed, and, of course, said yes. Then they came to us, beaming, excited, and said that they were now planning a wedding. Michelle asked if they could have the ceremony right here, at our place, on the shore of the lake, and again, without hesitation, I answered, yes. I'm so happy that you want to do it here. From then on, planning a wedding became our family epic. Sarah, as always, has shown initiative. She is already thinking about how to decorate the porch with fresh flowers, where to put tables on the lawn, how to hang lanterns around the perimeter so that everything glows with a soft light in the evening. Dad, in turn, with childish enthusiasm, is developing a scheme for garlands between the trees and promises to catch fish for fish soup the morning after the holiday. We laugh, argue, dream. It will be magical, and it is here in the house that I built not only from bricks and wood, but also from love, patience, and faith in the best. Sometimes, in especially quiet hours, when the wind barely stirs the leaves and everything seems too good to be true, I remember my mother, and I think, does she regret it? Does she understand what she missed? But honestly, I don't miss the drama, the tension, her constant complaining about life, or her endless talk of debt and money and sacrifice. I don't miss those moments when I felt like I had something to prove, something to deserve, something to justify my existence with the sums in my bank account. That weight is no longer on my shoulders. Things are different now. Sarah calls me every week, not because she needs anything, but just to check in on me, to share a recipe, to tell me what book she's reading, or what movie she liked. My dad texts me memes, photos of his fish, and sometimes awkward but so touching selfies with Sarah. Michelle sends me links to wedding venues, asks my opinion on fabrics, flowers, even the design of the invitations. That's real family, not the one that comes by blood, but the one that you build, that chooses you the same way you choose it. The ironic thing is that if my mother had simply been happy for me when I told her about the house, if she had supported me the way a loving mother does, I probably would have invited her to visit all the time. She could have come, enjoyed the sunsets, had tea with me on the veranda, walked the paths by the lake, even helped Sarah pick flowers for decor. But no, she needed to own it, control it, manage it. She couldn't bear the thought of me having something she couldn't take away. Last weekend was especially quiet. Sarah and I were sitting on the veranda, each with our own glass of white wine, our feet on the railing, our eyes on the water. She was telling me about a book she was reading, something about strong women and the importance of choosing yourself. I listened to her voice, soft and familiar, and felt a warm, deep gratitude spread through me. You know what I like most about this place? I asked. What? Sarah smiled. The only people here are the ones who really want to be with me, not the ones who want something from me. Sarah took my hand and squeezed it lightly. You deserve it, Ilaria. You deserve to be loved just for who you are, not for gifts, not for money, just for you. And she was right. I spent too many years trying to buy my mother's love, sending her money every time she asked, secretly hoping that maybe this time she would see me not just as a bank but as a daughter. I hoped that my effort would touch her, that she would want to be with me not out of convenience but out of desire. But it never happened. Because some people just don't know any other way, don't want to, or don't think it's necessary. Now I'm surrounded by a family that chose me, Sarah, who, when she married my father, didn't have to love me, but she did, sincerely, patiently, attentively, and respectfully. Dad, who could have ducked, stayed away, but stood by my side, supported me when I felt destroyed. Michelle, who could have wavered, maneuvered between us, but without hesitation stood next to me and celebrated my success as his own. These are the people who will be at the wedding next summer. Those who will dance under the stars on my lawn by the lake, drink wine, sing songs, laugh until the night turns to dawn. And my mother? She still drives her old car, still lives in the same house with Valentino and Ginevra, still probably complains about life, tells me how ungrateful I am and how unfair the world is, but that's not my problem anymore. I'm tired of feeling guilty for having what I've been working towards for many years, tired of making excuses for my successes, tired of being manipulated with tears, reproaches and pity. Now I live differently. I don't ask for love anymore. I accept it from those who are ready to give it for real. Write a comment on what you think about this story and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like it. See you soon.